Hello everyone, welcome back to Pseudocoder. This is chapter number 3 and today we are going to look at Python collection data types. Now what is Python collection data types? So these are some data structures that will help you to store multiple values. So previously we saw in the variables lecture that we saw actually 4 types of data types. We saw integer, float, boolean and string. So what if we want to store multiple things together? So in that case, we can use the Python collection data types. So they are used to store multiple values, as I have said before. And there are 4 types of collection data types there. First one is list. Second is set, tuple, and dictionary. So in this lecture, we are going to look at list extensively. So let's move on to the IDE to get started. List is a collection of multiple values, and let's see how can you define a list. So list can be defined using just square brackets. So here you can see that you can give it a variable name, you can give square brackets, and then you can write as many values as you want. Now what are these values? These values can be anything. Those can be integers, floats, strings, booleans, or even another list. So for example, if I have something called letters, this is the string, this is the list name, and then I have brackets, so square brackets, and inside that I can write now. So this is going to be my letters list. So it can be A, B, or C. So this is a list of my strings. Now, for example, I can also have a list of numbers, right? So I can have something called numbers, and then here I can write down the integers. So 1, 2, 3, something like that. Or I can also have something called, floats, and then I can have, 1.5 or 4.5. You get the here in letters. I can also have a list something like this. So letters can be this, and then I can have even integers or even floats in this. So a list can have different types of data structures in it, but the best practice here would be to use the same kind of data structure inside one list. Okay, so there are different ways of defining it. One is using square brackets. The next is using the list constructor. So you can do something like letters, and then you can do list like this. Here later you can add to this letters list. One other way of defining a list is, suppose you have something, if you want number of zeros and if you want a list that has 50 zeros. Okay, so do you want to go like 0 comma 0 comma 0? How many times are you going to do it? There is an efficient way of doing this in Python. So all you have to do is you have to have square brackets and then the value that you want across the list and space. Then you have a asterisk or multiplication sign, and you give the number of time it should be repeated. So for example, I want it 50 times. So I want a zeros list where I want 0 50 times, correct? So if I go ahead and print this, I do zeros and I click on execute, you can see that I get a list with zeros. And if I check the length of this, so I do length and I click on run again, you can see that the length is 50. So it did create a list of size 50 with all the values 0 in it. Okay, so these are some ways of defining a list. Now these lists are mutable, these are ordered. So what do you mean by mutable? Mutable means that at any point of time, any of the element inside the list can be changed. Okay, and the list also can be changed. Now ordered means that everything that we are going to add to the list is gonna get appended to the end of the list. So anything that we add is not gonna be somewhere in the middle, it is always gonna be appended at the end of the list. So that's why. And also the list order is gonna be maintained. That means that we can access each and every element if we know their index. Okay, so let's move on and see how can you access the items in a list. Python lists are ordered. So you can actually access them using their indexes. Now, what is an index? So every list that we create is going to have, items in it, and each item will have an index. So for example, an indexes in strings list, they start from 0. Keep that in mind, very important. They start with 0. So here, if you see, the first element that I have is going to have index 0. This is going to be index 1, and this is going to be index 2. So if we want to access any of these elements inside the list, what we can do is we have to write the list name. So letters in this case, and then square brackets, and here I can specify the index. So if I want to get the first element, so I can say 0. So it will get me A. Now I want to quickly test this, so I'm gonna go ahead and print it. So I say print and click on run. As you can see, it returns A. Now if I go ahead and do 2 here and I run this, it is saying, it is giving me back C. So that is the third element here, which is of index 2. If I go ahead and write here 4, which is actually out of the list, our list is only of length 3 and the last index we have is 2. If I go ahead and write 4 and I go ahead and execute this, we are going to get an error saying that list index out of range. So whenever you get an error that list index out of range, means that you are accessing something that is not there in the list. The index that you have provided is out of range. Okay, so that is one way of accessing the list. One super efficient thing that Python programmers use is if they want to access the last element, and if they do not really know the index of the last element, you can easily get that writing getting the length of the array and then doing -1. But there is an easier way to do that. You don't need to know anything. What you can do is you can do directly -1. So when you do that, it is going to get the last element. So -1 is the last item, -2 is the second last item, -3 is the third last item, and then you get the gist. Okay, so if I go ahead and execute this, you can see that, oh, it's not showing anything. I was not getting anything because I did not save the file. So I'm going to make sure I'm saving it. So if I go ahead and execute it now, you can see it is giving me C. If I go ahead and do -2, that should give me the second last item, which is B. So I go ahead and save and then run it. So you can see it is returning me B now. So you can use negative indices if you want to travel from the end of the list. Now, we also want to look at slicing. So for example, if you want to get multiple items from the list, you can do that here as well. So similar to strings, as we saw in the last lecture, we went through slicing in deep, and that is the same concept here. So what's happening in the slicing is that you give the list name, you give the starting index. So suppose if I want the first two elements of this list, so I can do 0 and colon, and then I give the end index. So here, remember that the end index is exclusive. That means that the end index is not included when it is calculating the items. So for example, here you see that this is 0 and this is 1. If I want to get these two elements, then what I have to do is, it is 0, 1, I have to mention here 2, because 2 is exclusive. Whatever you mention here, it is going to be that number -1. In our case, it is 2. So 2 minus 1 is 1. So here it is going to go from 0 to 1. So if I go ahead and print it and execute this, you'll see that it returns me A and B. Here you can also do this. So if you want, if you don't mention the end indice here, what it will do is it will go till the end of the list. So if I go ahead and execute this, you see that it starts from 0 and goes till the end of the list. If you want to start from a random place, suppose if you want to start from 1 and you don't give it here anything, it is going to start from B and go till the end of the list. Here, now you can choose to skip the start of the list, and you can say that I want to start from the beginning. but I want to end at a particular point. So you have to specify the particular point, and you can keep this empty. Whenever you keep that empty, that means that it is going to, if it's the left side, it will say that it is going to start from the start of the list. If you leave the right side empty, it is going to go till the end of the list. So if I go ahead and execute this, you'll see that it returns me A and B. That means it starts from, there is nothing here, so it will start from the start, which is 0. So 0 and goes till 1 because 2 is exclusive. So that is all about slicing. If you want to get a deep understanding of it, go watch my previous video. I've explained it thoroughly there. So now let's talk about the in operator. So in operator is something that we are going to cover in the upcoming lectures, but I wanted to introduce you to that because we are going to be using it in the upcoming data structures as well. So in operator is used to get something to check if a particular element is in the list. So for example, here I have A, B, C. What I can do is I can say A in, and then I can give the list name. So it is really simple. It just checks if A is in the letters list. If I go ahead and print this, so what is this going to return? If you ask it, is A in the letters? It is either going to say yes or no, correct? So that's what it does. It gives you either true or false. So if I go ahead and execute this, you can see that it gives me back true because A is in letters. If I go ahead and say Z, and I execute this, it is saying false. So Z is not in letters. So in is a very important operator that we use in collection data types, and you will see more uses of it as we move forward. This is a very basic understanding of in, but we are going to cover it later on in our one of our lectures. So don't worry about it. Okay, so let's talk about the next module that we have is add to the list. Now, there are several ways you can add to the list. So one way of adding to the list is using the append method. So what you do is you write the list name and then dot append. In parentheses, you mention the thing that you want to append. So for example, I want to append D. So if I do that, now after appending it, I just want to print it out. If I execute this, so I'm going to go and execute this, you can see that D was appended to my list. You can see it here. Okay, so that is one way of appending a element into the list. Now the second way is to what if. So here using append, what's going to happen is every time you append, it's always going to be added at the end of the list. So for example, if I take this and I do again another alphabet and I do this, you can see that E is appended at the end of the list, right? So that's what append does. Now, what if you want to insert something in between, right? So for that, you can use the dot insert method. So what does dot insert do is, dot insert actually takes in a index and also the character that you want to put in. So for example, here I do letters dot insert. Here first I have to give it the index where I want to put it. So for example, I want to insert something, say here at index 1. So I will give index 1. And what do I have to insert? What do I want to do? Say I want to do Z. So I do Z. And once I insert that, it is going to be insert. So Z is going to be inserted at index 1. If I go ahead and print this out, so I'm just going to get that print statement, move it here and execute this. You can see that Z is now appearing at index 1. So this is the power of insert method. Now, for example, you have two lists. So let me get rid of this. So now you have two lists. You have letters and say you have uppercase letters. Uppercase letters. Okay, here you have say A, B. Now you want to get all the elements that are there in uppercase letters inside your letters list, correct? So what do you do in that case? So you can use a dot extend method. So what does dot extend do is dot extend actually gets all the elements from one list and adds them to the to another list. Now first, suppose I want to have everything inside my letters list. So what I will do is I will do letters. So letters dot, then I do extend, because I want to extend the letters list. I want everything inside the letters list. So that goes first, dot extend, and then the list that we from which we want to take the elements and add to the letters list. So this is gonna be the uppercase letters. So once I do that and I execute this, you will now see that the letters list was ABC, here ABC, and then A and B, capital A, capital B, was appended to the letters list. Now what happened to the uppercase letters list? So let me go ahead and print that. So if I run this, you see that that list is unchanged, correct? Because we did not do any operations on uppercase letters. We just wanted the uppercase letters to be included in the normal letters list. So that's what we did. That is the power of dot extend. So remember that when you have two lists and you want elements of one list into another list, you can use dot extend method. Okay, so let's move on and see how can you modify the list or update the list. There are different ways of removing items from the list. The first method that we are going to look at is dot remove. So dot remove actually takes in the item that you want to remove and then removes it from the list. So how can you do it? You have to write letters, the list name, dot remove, and in parentheses you give the name of the character that you want to remove. So in this case, say I want to remove A, so I can say letters dot remove A, and if I go ahead and print that out and execute this, you will see that A has been removed. One thing about remove that you have to keep in mind is that if you give it something, so if I give it X and X is not there in the list, and if I go ahead and execute this, it will give you an error saying that list.remove X is not in the list. So it does raise an exception. So you have to keep in mind when using dot remove, you only use dot remove when you know that the exact element is present. Okay, so the next method that we are going to look at is dot pop. So dot pop is used. So let me go ahead and first remove this. Yeah. So dot pop is used to remove the latest element that we pushed into the list. So how is it done? It is letters dot pop. And if you keep it like this, what happens is whatever is at the end of the list is gonna get popped. So in our case, you will see that C will be, you can see that C has been popped and we get A, B as the list. Now in pop, you can choose it to keep it empty if you want to remove the latest element that we added, but you can also give index inside pop. So if you want to say pop a particular index, so if I say I want to pop B, what is its index? It is 1. So what I can do is I can say 1 inside pop and it is going to go ahead and pop B from the list. So if I go ahead and run it, you can see that it returns me A, C. So it has popped B from there. Okay, so there are three things that we saw: dot remove, and you have to give in the item that you want to remove. Dot pop will pop the last item in the list. Dot pop with index will pop the item at that index. And then now we are going to look at another method of deleting things. So let me go ahead and delete this. One more method of doing this is using del. So it's delete and then you give the letters array and whichever element that you want to remove. So for example, here I want to remove the first element. So this is another way of doing it. This is something that not most people do. Usually people do pop or remove, but this is one way of doing this. So let me go ahead and execute this. You can see that it has removed the first element, and it gives me back B and C. Okay. So one more thing that we are also going to look at is what if you want to clear the whole list? You want to get rid of all the items in the list. So are you going to go through pop, pop, pop every time? No, you are not. So a simple way of doing is using dot clear method. So what you can do is you can do letters dot clear, and that's it. That is going to get rid of all the items in the list. So let me go ahead and show you that. You can see that now the list is empty. So dot clear actually gets rid of all the items in the list. What if you just don't want the list anymore? You want to delete the list. So what you can do is you can do del, and then you can just write the name of the list. So once you do that, your list will be deleted. So if I go ahead and do that and try to print it, it should give me an error saying that that list doesn't exist. Now let me see what happens. So you see name letters is not defined. So it is saying that it cannot find the letters list and it cannot print anything. And it is true because we just deleted the letters list. So that was all about remove from the list. Let's go ahead and see the next thing in place. Let's see how can we sort a list. So there are two ways of doing that. The first thing is to use a dot sort method that will sort your list in place. Now what do I mean by in place? So what it does, it takes your list and then it sorts it and keeps the list intact. Okay, so how can you do that? So I think letters is not a great example for it. Let me add some more characters to it. I will also show you with numbers, but let me go ahead and do this. So it can sort really anything. If it's a character array, it will sort it alphabetically. If it's a number array, then it will just sort it numerically. Okay, so I have this list. If I go ahead and do letters dot sort and I print it, let me execute it. You see that it was A, Z, X, B, C, but it sorted it with A, B, C, X, Z. And you can see that it was in place. That means I did not have to assign it to anything like all our methods that we already looked at. So that is going to sort it. So now let's say I have numbers. I hope this will be better to understand. So think 7, 8, 3, 4, 2, 1. Okay, so I have this numbers list and I now go ahead and do numbers dot sort. When I do that and I print numbers, what will happen is it will take the numbers list and it will sort it. So you see it has sorted it 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. Okay, now there is what if you want to sort it in reverse order? So how do you do that? So there is a simple trick. What you can do is in the sort parentheses you do reverse equal to true. So when you do reverse equal to 2, that means it understands that it has to sort it in the descending order. So now if I go ahead and execute this, sorry. Yeah. Now if I go ahead and execute that, it is going to now sort it in descending order. As you can see, 8, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's the power of dot sort method. Now there is another method called dot sorted. So for example, you have a scenario where you have these numbers, but you do not want to change the numbers list. Instead, you want to store that sorted list in another variable. So how do you do that? So in that case, you cannot use dot sort. In that case, what you have to do is use the sorted method. So how do you do that? So you can say, sorted numbers. First, I define the variable. So sorted numbers, then I write the sorted method, and inside the parentheses, I give the array that I give the list that I want to sort. So I do numbers. So when I do that, what happens is it sorts this numbers list and then it assigns it to this sorted numbers. Now I'm going to go and print both. So I do sorted numbers and numbers as well. Just for simplicity, what I'm going to do is I will just wrap this up in. Okay. So I have sorted numbers and I have given it sorted numbers. I have numbers where I am printing numbers. As you can see, there is a sorted numbers list which was sorted, and then there's this numbers list which is actually the same, so it did not touch it. So if you have a scenario where you want to keep the original list as it is and you want a sorted version into another list, sorted method is the one that you go for. So that's all about sorted. Now let's move on to the next topic. In Python, there is a copy method. Now, why do we need that? We can just assign it to another variable and use it like that, correct? No, you're wrong. So let me show you a demo. Let me do this. So let me say this as copy letters and I will assign it the letters list. So what should happen? It should get this letters list. It should be, copied here. And if I go ahead and say update one of the characters inside the copy list. So if I go ahead and say update the first element to Z and I print both my lists. So I do first the letters list and then second I want to print out the copy list. So copy letters. So here if I go ahead and execute this, you will see that even if I only updated the copy letters list, the letters list also got updated. You can see that here from the output. See that both are updated to Z. Now, why does that happen? That happens because of the concept of pass by reference. So here what happens is when you assign the letters list to the copy letters list, it doesn't really assign the values. What it does, it creates a new pointer called copy letters and then it points it to the same list. So it's not really a copy, it's just another pointer. Now, how do you make a copy of the list? What if you want two lists? So what you do in that scenario is you do whichever list that you want to copy. So in our case, it is letters dot and then you do copy. That's it. So this is going to create a copy of the letters list and then assign it to copy letters. Now, if you go ahead and update the first value to Z, it should keep the letters list intact and not updated. So let me go ahead and execute. Now you can see that first we are outputting the letters list. It is still A, B, C as before as defined here. And then since we updated the copy letters list, you can see that it has been updated. The first element here is Z. So that's why we need a copy method in lists. So this is how you use it. Now let's move on to the next one. Lastly, we are going to look at the two applications of list that are very, very important in software engineering. You will see people using lists when they do competitive programming or any other platforms or in general in software engineering and using list as stacks and queues. And today we are going to learn about that. So there are two big applications of list, as I already told you. It's stack and queue. Now before moving into how list can be used, I want you to first understand what is a stack and what is a queue. So we are gonna go to the notepad and do a quick drawing explanation there. So see you there. Okay, so the first thing that we are gonna look at is stack. Now I want you to think of stack as a bucket. So here I'm gonna literally draw a bucket and here I'm gonna put items inside of it. So for example, I add A, B and C. So the A is the first one to get here, B is the second one and C is the third one to get here. Now, if I want to get A out of here, how can I do it? I first have to make sure that I get C out. So here I will be remained with A and B, and then I'll have to get B out so that I'm left with A. And finally, I can get A out. So you can see that in this bucket like structure, in this stack, whatever is going in last is coming out first. And that is why it is called LIFO, that is last in, first out. Okay, so that is what a stack is. Excuse me. And let's see what is a queue. So I want you to think of queue as a literal queue. So for example, you are at the movies and you are waiting in the queue for the popcorn. Whoever gets there first will be served first, correct? So here, if I have a movie theater and I have a queue, so I have A, B, C, D. So A was here first, so he will be served first, then B, then C, and then D. So that is what a queue is. And since whoever got here first is getting out first, it is called first in, first out, which is FIFO. So you'll see people usually refer to queue as FIFO and stack as LIFO, and that's what they mean. FIFO is first in, first out. LIFO is last in, first out. Now let's move on to the IDE and see how can we actually implement this using list. The first thing here we have to do is to create a stack. So let's do that, stack, and then this. So basically I created a list and named it stack. Now I'm going to add items to my stack. So stack.append, and I add A. Then I add another element. So I'm just going to copy paste A, B, and C. Okay. So once I have that, let me just print and see what we have in the stack currently. So I print that, execute. I can see that I have 3 elements. Okay. So in stack, what we do is we have to pop the last element that got in, right? So the element that got in last, basically. So here in this case, we want to pop C. So do you remember the method that we used for that? We just used pop without any index. So that's what I'm going to do. So suppose if I do stack.pop, here I have A, B, C. If I pop one element from the stack and I click on execute, you'll see that we got rid of C and we only have A and B in the list. If I do that again, if I pop another element, execute, you see that I have only one element now. If I go ahead and pop another one and execute, now I have empty list. What if I go ahead and pop it again? We get an error saying that we cannot pop from empty list. So that's how you can add elements to the stack. That's how you can pop elements to the stack. This is a fully functional stack. Okay. So let's move on. Let's see what is a queue. So I'm going to create another list and name it queue. So queue, square brackets, this is my queue. And I'm going to append things to my queue. So I do append, and this time I'm doing numbers. So 1, queue.append 2, and then lastly queue.append 3. So I have 3 items in the queue, 1, 2, and 3. Let's print that out. So I do print queue, execute. I have 1, 2, 3. Now here I want to pop things. So basically what I have to do here is whichever element got in here first is gonna get popped first, correct? So here if you can see, 1 got here first, so I should be popping 1 first and then 2 and then 3. And here if you notice that 1 is the one that got here first, and what is the index of that? It is 0, correct? So that's what we are going to really use. We are just going to use a pop function and give it index 0 to pop the first element that got into the queue. So I can do queue dot pop 0. So when I do that and I execute it, you can see that I'm left with 2 and 3. It got rid of 1. Now the next time I have to again do pop of 0 because now my second element, the item 2, is again at index 0. So I'm just going to do a q dot pop of 0 again, execute. I'm left with just 1, and then if I go ahead and pop that one as well, I'm now left with empty string. And as you have guessed already, if I go ahead and pop it again, then if I click on execute, it is going to say cannot pop from empty list. So I hope stack and queues are clear now. I hope this video was helpful. I hope you know everything about list now. The next lecture is going to be on tuples. If you like this one, please give it a thumbs up, comment below. It really helps out my channel. And please subscribe if you want to see any similar videos, if you want to see the courses coming up. And also I have a blind 75 series and also the Python algorithm and data structure series. So please make sure to check that out as well. So thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.